Hello, my name is Gary Neustadter, and with me here is Jessica Stevens, a student at Santa Clara, and Patty Rao, who's a professor at Santa Clara. Patty and I will be co-directing the program in Oxford in summer 2017, and Jessica was a student in the program this last summer. So we thought we'd take this opportunity to talk with you a little bit about what the program is like and to have Jessica share some of her experiences with you. I'll start by describing the core of the program. Patty will talk a little bit about the seminars, and then we'll also talk about Oxford and some of the cultural and recreational things that you can do in Oxford. The core of the program, which was established back in 1978, is to use the very famous Oxford and Cambridge style tutorials. Those tutorials are conducted by English legal scholars, including professors at Oxford or Cambridge or other universities in the United Kingdom on subjects of their expertise. Students are in particular areas, for instance, comparative constitutional law or comparative environmental law or privacy law or comparative property law, jurisprudence, and a variety of other subjects, and those vary from summer to summer depending upon who's available. The basic idea of a tutorial is the tutor, the professor, assigns a list of readings and a topic. The student has about a week to do the readings, to write a paper somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 words, though that varies from tutor to tutor, and then actually defend that paper and discuss the student's conclusions with the tutor in a session of about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half. Usually one-on-one, so it's the student and the tutor, one-on-one, talking with one another. Occasionally the tutor likes to work with two students at once. So that's the basic idea. You do that 5 times during the program. It's, we think, a unique educational experience, one that's not comparable to much of anything that we know in the United States. And let me invite Jessica to talk some about the tutorial that she had, the tutor she had, and what her experience was like in that tutorial.
So I did the tutorial with Professor Josephine Van Zeven, and she's an expert in the area of international environmental law and also the topic of multi-level governance. And the tutorial topic that we did was international trade and the environment. As Professor Neustadter said, we met 5 times during the program session, and for each tutorial I had an assigned reading and a paper to write. And if you want to pursue the topic in more depth, or if you're interested in adapting it, because these are one-on-one courses and because the professors really take the time to get to know the students and their individual interests, you can sort of adapt each tutorial as you go along. And so I think, you know, it's a great opportunity to have somebody really analyze your writing and give you very particular and concrete feedback. And also, it was just very interesting to be able to engage in a discussion with somebody who's so knowledgeable on the material, especially once you've had a chance to go through it and digest it, because you really get to question some of the assumptions that you might have had. You really get to question why, you know, authors in the field are concentrating on particular topics, and you really get to go in depth into different topics in a way that you don't have the opportunity when you're in a classroom setting with many students. So it's a fabulous opportunity. It is indeed very unique, not something I've ever done anywhere else, and I found it to be very exciting and challenging in a positive way, and it really helped me expand my horizons in the area of international environmental law and international trade.
So Jessica, some tutors ask their students to actually read the paper from beginning to end. Others ask the student to send the paper to them in advance so that they can read it. Others, in combination with either of those two things, just have a conversation. And I'm wondering if you can describe a little bit more about what your tutor and you did in that regard.
Sure. So Professor Van Zeven's preference was to have the paper in advance so that she would herself have time to go over it and, you know, think through some of my ideas and give me written feedback when I would show up for my session. And then we would go back over specific parts of the paper. I don't recall ever reading any sections of my paper aloud, but for some of the papers, we definitely spent a large chunk of time focusing in on some of the meatier questions or the more intriguing topics that we covered. And I think my personal preference was to have the paper done in advance because I felt like it gave the professor more time to give me feedback on the substance. But I think somebody who's really interested in focusing on their writing form would enjoy the other alternative, which is reading your paper out loud, because as I understand it, students who did that felt like it really helped them become better writers, be more concise in their writing and more organized. So I know that people enjoyed the fact that there were different options and the professors had different approaches.
So let me ask you something as well. Do you think the program, while it's unique and it's obviously very challenging and exciting, is a benefit once you came back to the United States and you're continuing to explore this area of environmental law?
Definitely. I mean, Santa Clara has classes in environmental law, as do I think most law schools in the nation. So even if you're going back to your home institution, I think you can follow up on the substance. But what's also, I think, really rewarding is perhaps enrolling in a seminar class once you come back, because I think you can take some of the techniques from what you'll learn in your tutorial about how to really dive into a topic and find appropriate reading and develop your analysis skills to write a final paper. And I find seminar classes are very conducive to that. So it was nice to come back and take our seminar on globalization and the rule of law, where we did touch upon some international environmental issues and international trade issues, because I think both on a substantive level and on a form level, I was able to develop what I had started learning about in the tutorial at Oxford.
So Professor Van Zeeben teaches at one of the colleges of Oxford University, which has 30 to 40 different colleges. Do you recall what college that was? Was it?
Yeah, so she's associated with Worcester, which it's written Worcester, but you pronounce it Worcester, as I understand. And she teaches both environmental law and international law, and her particular focus and research is on multi-level governance. So that's the other amazing thing I think about the Oxford program, is that the professors really have broad practices, but they're experts in a number of different areas. And so you can really have a multidisciplinary approach to a certain topic. And if you are interested in expanding your readings and getting more input from the professors, I think that they're very adept at being able to advise and give you guidance in other areas as well.
So as a practical matter, students should know that the tutorials are typically held in the professor's office at whatever college they teach, though there are some professors we have from outside of Oxford where we arrange a room to meet at Magdalen College. So if your housing is at Magdalen College, where most of our students stay, then if the tutorial is being offered at another college, then you have usually a lovely and interesting walk from Magdalen College, in your case to Worcester College, to meet the tutor. But that's a nice way to get a little bit of exercise and always to see the lovely town of Oxford, which we can talk about shortly.
One thing I'll add on that, if you don't mind, is that it's actually very difficult to access the other colleges because each college is its own separate entity and they have their own admission systems. They're walled off and physically inaccessible. And so if you do have the opportunity to take a tutorial with a professor from one of the other colleges, it's a good excuse to go and visit the grounds, which are absolutely lovely, of another Oxford college.
We agree.
Yes.
We agree.
So Professor Rao, do you want to talk some about the lectures?
Well, we've talked about the tutorial system, but it's complemented with a series of seminars where every student attends. So it's not one-on-one, and also an opportunity to go to a criminal trial in Oxford itself. So let me begin with the seminars. There are 5 or 6 seminars once a week, and tutors again, or Oxford scholars, come in and talk about a particular area of expertise. For example, there was one who talked about sovereign parliament, he and another, and in the United States we have a constitutional system. Unlike that, in the UK, they really don't have a formal constitution, notwithstanding the Magna Carta. And they talk about the advantages and disadvantages of a system where law is not based on constitutional rights, but it's really Parliament and the power of Parliament and the courts attending what Parliament has said. And just inviting students to chat about, well, which do you think is the better of the two systems? And of course, US students, I think, are wedded to a constitutional system. It's important. And the first time I heard the talk, I thought, well, of course, the Constitution is better. But by the end of the seminar and the interaction among all of us, I thought, well, there is a benefit too to a parliamentary system. Another seminar looked at the privacy right, whether one should be created in the UK. For example, everybody knows about hacking, and sometimes people have hacked into people's personal accounts. One in particular was the Ashley Madison case of a year or two ago, and people were being exposed for signing up to married men, signing up to have an affair with a woman. Should there be a tort so that someone could sue when that information has been exposed? So it gives the students an opportunity to hear about other topics in the European Union or the UK, and a chance to interact with the professor again. And then the second thing I mentioned is the criminal court, where you have an opportunity to meet with the judge before the trial. And it's interesting because the English criminal system does not necessarily parallel ours. There's some likenesses and differences. And then to watch a part of the trial. So again, I'm going to invite Jessica to talk about the seminars and the trial, and kind of chat with us about how you enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. So the seminars were fascinating. What I really enjoyed about them was the diversity of the topics that we covered. In this year in particular, the parliamentary sovereignty seminar was fascinating because the United Kingdom, I believe we had that seminar right before they were going to vote on whether or not they should leave the European Union. And now, as you may be aware, one of the questions is whether or not that vote should have actually gone to Parliament instead of to the people in a referendum. So we were talking about a lot of very interesting things in that seminar in particular. But the other seminars as well were fascinating. Probably no one would agree that property law is fascinating, but the first day we were talking about, the first seminar we had was a comparative property law seminar. And it was really interesting to recognize that the United States, a lot of our laws come from the United Kingdom, but they've actually done a number of reforms to make it much more simplified. And so they now have a more simple system of property law than we do here, even though the origins of our property laws are from the UK. We also had a seminar on environmental law. We had a seminar on the international arms trade agreement. And so it was the diversity of topics kept it really interesting, and meant that even though students might be coming from different backgrounds of the law from their home institution, everybody was able to participate in the various seminars because they were quite introductory for a number of us. And on the criminal court visit, I actually found that visit to be so interesting. I wrote my final paper on a comparison between the US criminal law system and the criminal law system in England and Wales. And the day that we went to court, the defendant who was on trial was accused of great bodily harm and was actually testifying that day. And so one of the interesting things is that he needed an interpreter. So we were sort of able to see how the UK, as a very multicultural country, is dealing with language issues within their court system. And it was really fascinating. I think everybody found it to be a worthwhile experience. And we also visited the Supreme Court when we did our visit to London. And we also went to a session of the Court of Appeals. So we had a number of court visits, and especially the criminal court was very interesting.
You mentioned a final paper, and that's a short one you have to produce, but can you speak to some of the differences between the criminal system in the UK versus the United States that you found rather unique or even a bit shocking, surprised to see?
Sure. Well, one of the fundamental differences, and this is something that's very heavily debated in the UK right now, is in the US we have a constitutional protection where a criminal defendant is assured to have representation, but that equivalent does not exist in the UK. And so theoretically somebody could be a criminal defendant in their justice system and not have any representation. The other thing is that in the US we have voir dire for jury selection, and the UK that does not exist. So they literally draw 12 names out of a hat, and unless you know the defendant or there's a very clear conflict of interest of some sort, then that is the jury that will be sitting for the case. And there are a number of smaller differences too, the definition of murder and the like. One thing that I thought was really interesting was that in the UK, the defendant actually has to go sit in an area called a dock, and it's a walled off in glass, very separate area, whereas in the US, the criminal defendant sits with their attorney in front of the judge. And I had looked at a study that said that the jury, just seeing that the person has been sort of sequestered in that way, can have an impact on whether or not they think that the person is guilty. So I'm sure that it was a brief paper, as you mentioned, but I think that there are many more topics that somebody could explore in the future. But it was just very interesting, and it was that day in court that really sort of inspired me to pursue the topic a bit further.
We've been blessed the past couple of years to have that visit to the criminal courts arranged by a barrister who practices criminal law with a firm in Oxford. And she typically also meets with the students the night before the visit to the courts to talk some about what it means to represent criminal defendants as a barrister in that court system. And the last time we directed the program, she led a very interesting discussion about the impact of budget cuts in the United Kingdom on a representation that might be available to defendants.
Yeah, I believe her name is Miss Tapper, and she talked about legal aid again this time. And one of the other things that she did that was really great for the students was to arrange for the judge that day to speak to us during the recess of the court. And he's the highest judge in the entire Oxford County, and took the time to explain the system to us. And it was really fascinating, and the students were very appreciative.
Yeah, I think one of the niceties of the program is the opportunity to get very involved in the theoretical aspect of a particular issue and professor scholarship and your own interest in that area, but also blending that with what I call, the practice of law. So actually, meeting with the judge, watching a criminal trial, going to London, and maybe you want to speak for a moment about the Supreme Court. I don't know if you recall the issue in front of it, and their court has been redesigned. It's more informal than our U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's a brand new building. Unfortunately, we weren't able to attend on the day where they were having hearings, but we were able to visit the building. And it's, I believe, I don't recall the year, but sometime within the last 10 years, I believe that the courthouse was built. It used to be that the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom was part of the House of Lords, and they've now formed a body that is a separate collection of justices who sit on the cases. And one of the interesting things too is we got to visit the chamber where the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom sits when they're deciding cases for members of the Commonwealth countries. So for example, even though the death penalty does not exist anymore in the United Kingdom, it does exist in some of the Commonwealth countries, and so they will hear death penalty appeals in the Supreme Court there. Interesting. Yeah.
The trip to London, as Jessica indicated, includes a visit to the Supreme Court, and Jessica also mentioned the Court of Appeals, and we take the students to the Royal Courts of Justice, which is located in central London, and it's an architectural marvel, and also introduce students to one or two of the four Inns of Court. Inns of Court are the institutional organizations in the United Kingdom to which every barrister has to become a member. It serves as both an educational and a social role in acclimating new lawyers to the role of barrister. So in that connection, we also take a look at the difference between what barristers and solicitors, in essence, two different kinds of lawyers in the United Kingdom do, and what distinguishes the kind of work that they do. So that trip to London is an all-day affair. And we've tried in the past to arrange a very nice lunch for the students at one of the Inns of Court, and to have one of the representatives of the Inns of Court talk to the students about the nature of one of those inns.
That was a great visit, and it was really interesting as an American law student to understand how students in the UK system become either a solicitor or a barrister, and it was fascinating. And as I understand, getting access to the inns is quite difficult, and especially having a meal in their beautiful dining halls is difficult. So the program definitely provides for an amazing opportunity by organizing that.
Harry Potter-like?
Very much so, yes.
The place where you eat.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about what it's like to live in Oxford and visit places that you can get easily from Oxford. Starting.
Can I just interrupt with something? When we walk out every morning from our room in Magdalen College, we called it, it's like an adult Disneyland. It's called the City of Charming Spires, and that is a very apt description. So I'm sure you can add to that and continue.
Well, that actually stole my line.
Oh, I am
But
sorry.
that's fine. It is delightful. Whenever we've been there, and Professor Rao and I have been there for 5 times, this will be our 6th time, we always pinch ourselves more than once a day at how lucky we are to be enjoying such an historical, marvelously beautiful place such as Oxford, and also to enjoy the beauty of the English countryside, the ability to get to London 24 hours a day, 365 days a year by bus that leaves every 10 minutes from a location that's not more than a 5-minute walk from Magdalen College. And of course, the rail system and the bus system throughout the United Kingdom and the air travel that's available throughout Europe is much, much better than in the United States. And you can get literally anywhere very easily and very quickly. So students, although they're spending most of their time, or at least much of their time, doing the work for their tutorials, do have occasional opportunities to visit the sites either in the United Kingdom or occasionally elsewhere in Europe. Maybe you can tell
us
folks about what you liked about the city of Oxford, about
travels?
London, and any travel that you did.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we can start with Oxford. Just to echo, it is absolutely beautiful. The architecture is amazing. The history of the town, it's everywhere. You know, when you're walking by, you look up and you see dates going back to the 15th century, and you know, sometimes you're asking yourself, I wonder who put that there, what their life was like at the time. It's really amazing. It's beautiful. It's also very modern. So, you know, Wi-Fi is everywhere in the cafes. It's very easy to stay connected while you're, you know, moving around the town. The campus itself, when you're enrolled in the program, you'll get access to all of the libraries, and especially the Bodleian Library, which they actually did film Harry Potter in, is beautiful and is fun to just go and visit in and of itself, but also it's a great place to go and study. There are a number of pubs. I think one of the oldest pubs might go back to the 1500s, where you can go and hang out with the students, and also you can partake in the traditional tea time if you want in the afternoon. There are a number of tea houses in the city, so it's really beautiful and very accessible, either by foot or by public transportation, and there's Wi-Fi everywhere, and everything that you need is right there. The buses that go to London, they leave all the time, and they also have Wi-Fi for free. So again, it's easy to stay connected. You can definitely go to London for a day and come back if you want. I spent one weekend in Wales, which was absolutely beautiful and very accessible. And actually Wales had been in the semifinals of the Euro Cup, which for them was a big deal. They hadn't made it to that late stage of an international soccer tournament, I think, since 1958. And I know that a number of students went to go watch the game in Cardiff. So traveling is definitely possible. Obviously, just make sure that you're safe and that you inform the program directors if you're going to be away, so that they know that you're back. But I think that's one of the big, you know, pluses about being in Europe, where public transportation is accessible and works very well, is that you should take advantage of it and try to visit. And London, of course, is a very fun, international, multicultural city, absolutely worth spending some time there. And it's so accessible. You can do a day trip or stay overnight, and there are tons of activities. I know that some students went to go see plays at the Globe Theatre and had tea time at the restaurant there. So, you know, there's the millions of opportunities. Everything is open to you.
And I must add that we have, had we been there last summer, we would have been in Wales watching that football game too, Gary and I. So, and it's only 90 minutes from Oxford to London by bus. So it really is a very quick trip, even a little shorter by train. Did you travel at all besides Wales, or maybe other students, like on weekends? And what were the favorite attractions?
So I know a number of students who went to Edinburgh and really enjoyed it. I went to Paris and again took the train. That was very easy. I don't know the furthest that anybody traveled, but depending on your schedule, you know, you could have 4 or 5 day stretches where you might not have a class. So, you know, it all just depends on your schedule. And there are a number of cheap budget airlines in Europe too that allow you to go a bit further when you're on a student budget. So,
do you want to talk a little bit about the cultural and recreational opportunities in Oxford, either of you?
Yeah, well, so there are definitely a number of pubs that organize pub quiz nights. There are a number of museums. You can also join some of the student clubs that are on campus. I went to a couple of salsa dancing nights, which was very fun. And there's just, the campus is teeming with people. There are people from all over the world who are there either for research or for study. And so I think really, if you're open to meeting new people and taking some initiative, there's just are a million opportunities and things that you can become involved with.
I know I like to jog in the mornings, and there are magnificent areas to jog, and I have to watch out that I don't trip because I'm gawking at all of the lovely scenery and the architecture. You can walk along the Thames. There are beautiful university parks. It's just an extraordinary opportunity to see a lot that's all within walking distance. You don't have to worry about a car. Parking a car, you can just get about anywhere. There are also lots of musical events, lots of plays, lectures, and just so many things that you can't possibly see them all, but enough that would appeal to anybody's taste.
And there's Shakespeare in the park.
Mm-hmm.
There are colleges that do Shakespeare. I've more than once invited my husband to attend, but he's more than once not been feeling well that evening. But I've gone with students, and they're outside on the college grounds. There are concerts in old churches, just a real variety of things. For almost any interest that you have, Oxford, will give you a chance to pursue that interest.
And a lot of it is for free. I just recalled that on one of the last nights there, I went to go to a concert. The Orchestra of Central Asia was touring the United Kingdom, and they played in one of the old churches there, and it was beautiful. Yes.
So I think you can tell from the three of us that we're always, we're really excited about Oxford.
Yes.
Patty and I have gone there 5 times. This is going to be our 6th time, and we can't wait to get there.
Back,
I would go back if I could.
We've heard that more than once. Students say, well, if I could go another summer, I'd be back there.
We've been there often enough that, strangely enough, now that when we're walking down the sidewalk, tourists seem to recognize that we know the place and often stop and ask us for directions. So if you come this coming summer in 2017, you'll be well taken care of.
Yes.
We won't be your parents, but we will be there to offer you guidance and encouragement and support. And
Go out to dinner a couple of times together or on a pub crawl, introduce you to the city.
so we hope you consider the program. We think it's a great program.
Any last words, Jessica?
Yeah, I just really encourage students to take advantage of all the opportunities once you're there, because it goes by quickly and sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. So just make sure that, when there's something new to try, go for it, and really take advantage of the tutorials, because I think that one-on-one time with the professor is a very unique experience, and it's really something that will, I think, help longer term, especially in the writing and the oral advocacy skill building. So really take advantage of that opportunity.
So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you very
we
much.
appreciate you
Yes.
sharing your insights.
Yes.
It was a great program.
Good.